You ever look around camp in Baldur's Gate 3 and wonder, why does Gale die in every fight I bring him into? How does Shadowheart find a way to miss Guiding Bolt each and every time I cast it? Or even the age-old question of, why is Wyll so useless? How strong are these characters really? I mean, not in terms of their in-game strength. My horrendous builds will make any of these characters look about as useful as Scratch bringing me a torch. Good boy. I'm talking in terms of lore, because their performance in combat may not prove much, but their history in the Forgotten Realms paints a very different picture. Mommy Karlach swinging Baldur's greatsword 10 times in a single turn might not be representative of her canon strength. It actually really is. The same way that Wyll might not be the mediocre warlock that many paint him out to be. Welcome to Figuring Out Fantasy, where we'll be taking a look at each and every companion we can recruit across the 3 acts in Baldur's Gate 3, and seeing just how they stack up against one another in terms of their lore-accurate strength in the Forgotten Realms. Though while we are digging into these characters' histories, the rankings are going to be ultimately based on their powers just before the start of the prologue in Act 1. So the tadpole isn't affecting most of these spots, but there are some whose infection dates a bit farther back than the intro cutscene and might be hindered as a result. You might be able to guess some spots, but can you get the list entirely right? Let me know what you either agree or disagree with in the comments below, and if you want to see more ranking videos like this, be sure to like the video to let me know, and subscribe so you don't miss the next upload. Before we jump into the rankings though, I want to take a quick second to shout out the sponsor of today's video, War Thunder. If you've ever wanted to command a tank, fly a fighter jet, or rain destruction from a battleship and have it actually feel legit, War Thunder's the game to play. It's hands down the most comprehensive vehicle combat sim out there, and it's available for free right now on PC, consoles, and even mobile. You get access to 2,500 vehicles from the 1920s all the way up to modern day battle tanks and jet fighters. We're talking tanks, helicopters, naval ships, aircraft, you name it, from 10 different nations. Everything's incredibly detailed with high fidelity graphics, authentic sound design, and physics that make every hit feel like it matters, because it does. One of my favorite parts is the damage model. It's just like one of my favorite games, Monster Hunter. There's no health bar nonsense here. Vehicles are modeled down to individual parts like the crew, engine, and ammo racks. A single well-placed shot can change everything, and the X-ray kill cam shows you exactly how the damage plays out. It's absurdly satisfying. Also, just to be real, I didn't think I'd care for the mobile version, but it's sick. Same huge PvP battles, great visuals, and it runs shockingly well. Personally, I'd recommend picking a side and getting into realistic mode. It's that perfect middle ground. Not too arcadey, but not full sim either. You can play War Thunder now for free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, or mobile using the links in the pinned comment or the video description. And if you're new or returning and haven't played in a while on PC or console, you'll get a massive bonus pack just for signing up through my link. That includes multiple premium vehicles, the exclusive Eagle of Valor vehicle decorator, 100,000 silver lions, and 7 days of a premium account, but it's only available for a limited time. So don't wait, hit that link, claim your bonus, and I'll see you on the battlefield. Now let's get to what you all came for. Before we begin with the actual top 10, I need to get a little honorable mention out of the way. With patch 7 came the ability to fully recruit Alfira to your party, and trust me, I know how nutso bards can get with some builds, but come on, did anybody expect her to get anything but last place? I did feel it was slightly unfair to rank her against the rest of the party members in a legit manner, hence the honorable mention. And top 10 sounds a lot better than top 11. There are qualities of tieflings that make them proficient in handling certain situations like darkness or the heat of the hells, but she is realistically a part of the group in the Emerald Grove whose fate entirely rests in the hands of our character's choices. I'd imagine if she was truly capable of anything more than a single one of our other party members, she'd have fought to do something for her people other than just play her loot. Or maybe she would have done something to help us against the goblin invasion? Point is, she's not on the list for being just a bit too normal. Honestly though, that description is not too far off from the number 10 entry on this list. Astarion can dish out huge sneak attacks, but when he was just a magistrate in the city of Baldur's Gate, a few Gur were able to jump him in an alley and beat him to the brink of death. Sure, we all know he was brought back to health by Cazador, but is a vampire spawn all that much more capable than your average elf? I'd argue any advantages given unto him by the vampire lord are balanced out by the inherent traits of what being a spawn entails. Until his tadpole affliction, he was simply a thrall, like any other vampire spawn, needing to find shelter from the sunlight only to be active and feast at night. Though he was under complete control of Cazador during his exertions out into the city to find prey for the Black Mass ritual, that doesn't really enhance any of his capabilities. Cazador utilized Astarion's charm in both appearance and conversation to make him his most effective thrall. Not through the strength he offered, but the social capabilities he possessed in order to lure souls to their doom. And this list is not covering how these characters may end up by the end of their quest lines, so Vampire Ascendant Astarion won't be covered here. I thought of including those scenarios, but I think the list would just get too muddied up. But let me know if you want to see that list too, about how strong each of these party members find themselves after their different endings. Could be fun. Anyways, the point is, I really can't give Astarion any more credit than what he is, a spawn of Cazadors. Whilst one of the Vampire Lord's favorites, that honor doesn't give him bonus points here. And moving to number 9, the concept is sort of the same, an individual under the thumb of a far more mighty power than they can hope to understand. It drives their actions and even gives them an upper hand in some instances, but at the end of the day, they're still just your average mortal. Shadowheart is a cleric of Shar and holder of the astral prism we carry through the acts. She carries a mighty task, but I'm not so convinced that without the rest of the party, she'd get very far on that task.
Huh? There's a video on YouTube showing how far each companion would get on their own? That's pretty cool. What? Shadowheart made it the farthest?
Okay, maybe that theory's out the window, so let's see what she's got to offer. Shadowheart was sent on a mission by Mother Viconia to retrieve the astral prism and return with it to Baldur's Gate. She certainly wasn't alone on this mission, but by the end of it, she was. I think it's quite a testament to her innate capabilities for her to have been able to heal her way through the hurdles that the team faced. She couldn't save everyone, but she did enough to save herself, and that deserves a bit of credit. I can't be convinced though that while she did enough to not find herself dead in the name of Shar, that other Sharans were incapable of fulfilling the mission cast unto her. It's likely that a good majority of those we end up finding in the Sharan Sanctum in Baldur's Gate alongside Mother Viconia would have succeeded. No? She was able to slay the Night Song in some scenarios, but that's not as much proof of her capabilities and more of what the spear can do in the hands of Shar's most devout followers. Her prowess as a trickster domain cleric though surely trounces any rogue skill Astarion could put on display. So I'm fairly confident in placing her above at least him, but she by no means competes with the rest of the list. I mean, she does have her beef with Lae'zel, where she's able to come out on top holding a knife to the Githyanki's throat, but let's be honest here, if we were to really compare, do her sneaky antics as a Sharan worshipper truly eke her out ahead in true strength? I'm not buying it, because even though Lae'zel of Kalir has no relationship with a god such as Shar, an entity who is there for the literal conception of Abir Tiril and the entire Forgotten Realms, she has been training alongside the fearsome Githyanki since the age of 13 in preparations for battles upon red dragons and to live up to the expectations of what she believes to be her god, Vlaakith, Lich Queen of their people. Shadowheart certainly had her training in preparation of being a Dark Justiciar, but as we witness in the Githyanki Kresh, Lae'zel's people have a bit more emphasis on true battle experience and carrying themselves as proper warriors. And what we can understand over the course of the Cleric storyline was that her true nature as a Cellunite kept rising to the surface and made some aspects of honing her Sharan abilities difficult. We'd expect any proud warrior to speak highly of themselves, but we even hear from many of Lae'zel's old instructors that she was spoken of as a prodigy amongst the Kresh. Training as a young Githyanki is no joke, and we'll find evidence of such in the sparring grounds where Savarshketh is reprimanding one of his students in a non-verbal way, let's just say. Though while she's been through the ringer in her years growing up, I don't think she's seen any real combat outside the Kresh, given how young she is. She had likely just started her journey as an established Githyanki with all the aspirations of slaying a Geik in the name of Vlaakith, but hadn't gotten the chance to prove what she learned outside of the Kresh arenas. But her competition versus the countless other youthful Githyanki growing up alongside her, and as we can see, versus maybe her instructors themselves who seem to not hold back, let us assume that she's quite capable despite the lack of diversity in her combat experience. It's certainly enough to think that she'd be able to easily come out on top versus somebody like Shadowheart or Astarion if they were to engage in a legitimate duel. Lae'zel is the first of these adventurers who wouldn't need to rely on tricky schemes or elusively gaining advantages to win. I believe there are outlets to being deemed more powerful without aspects of true inherent strength, and cunning methods to assume the upper hand in a combat encounter like Shadowheart or Astarion are capable of is certainly in that vein, but it's just not enough to get out in front of Lae'zel's pure combat prowess. Though there are still many spots to go, and while the amateur Githyanki may have strength that seems to clearly set her apart from the two that came before her, I think the bottom three are more defined than the others. And here's where we begin to get to characters who are truly rugged and have seen some shit, leaving little to no argument towards putting them in front of either Astarion, Shadowheart, or Lae'zel. Before we move to the heavy hitters of the list, I just want to take a moment to let you know that subscribing to the channel is the best way to both enjoy all of my content as it comes out and support me in making making even more of it for all of you. These videos take quite a bit of effort to make, and you helping out with just the click of a button is all I need to know to keep them coming. In moving to number 7 on our list, the sentiments held in any arguments for Lae'zel's strength can only be used to a greater effect here. While the Githyanki may start some rather brutal training around the age of 13, as a drow, Minthara was not afforded such a period of childhood to grow accustomed to the world. Her first dangerous encounter even coming when she was just a newborn, being fed by her mother. She was shielded from an assassination attempt, and it was just the start to tragic events that she would endure in her younger years. But as they kept coming, they hardened her to be a cold and vengeful individual. She was even forced to leave the same one who shielded her from the assassination attempt with a second scar years later, as Minthara found herself under attack by her own mother. I can't imagine she was very old in this moment, and for her to be capable of showing not just a hesitation to kill at such a young age, but to have such a motivation to leave her with a scar as well just to make her remember it, only shows just how long she's been trending towards the grown adult we meet her as in the game. But taking one more step back into the past, the sequence of her being claimed by the Absolute has Minthara in positions where I can't say somebody like Lae'zel would ever find herself in. While she was coerced into a trap at Moonrise Towers, the group of cultists sent to her home in Menzoberranzan were left as corpses for decoration once their audacity offended her. It's not a crazy feat to take down some cultists, but this is some of the diverse battle experience that Lae'zel seems to have been lacking. And once she does attempt to raid Moonrise Towers, it might not have been successful, but to be honest, I don't think a single character on this list would have been. Though where it does give Minthara credit is after she becomes a true soul under the Absolute, where she's directed to lead the hordes of goblins we find in Act 1. Okay, yes, goblins are goblins, but there's no small number of those fuckers. And she even has the capability to take down the Emerald Grove if things go a bit in her favor. Enough evidence to pretty handily give her the number 7 spot, but I will say the evidence present in the number 6 and number 5 spots had me coming to a conclusion that many might disagree with me on. So let's talk about them at the same time. What could go wrong? It's a bit poetic how Karlach and Wyll house the next 2 spots. The two of them in tandem provide some of the most genuine interactions the game has to offer. They both have their gripes with Avernus, and what they've each experienced in their time dealing with the Hells are the largest testaments to what both of them are capable of, but it's presented in a bit of different fashions. Karlach fought in the damn Blood War, a conflict between demons from the Abyss and devils mostly from Avernus. And she was killing both them sons of bitches, but the evidence of her strength was shown far before that event. She was chosen to be Gortash's personal bodyguard, a position I don't think would be filled lightly, and it makes it pretty clear what kind of innate power she possesses. Now, Wyll didn't have this proof of his capabilities at such a young age, but when he was just a bit younger than Karlach was when she was sold to Zariel and started fighting in the Blood War, he was blessed with some of the greatest abilities anybody could imagine. At 17, Wyll Ravengard faced off against a cult of Tiamat, who were actively threatening to flatten the city of Baldur's Gate using an avatar of the 5-headed dragon Fiend. It was clear he stood no chance, and he was purely there off of a sense of fate, but this was the moment that Mizora came to flood his ear with the potential to overcome this monstrous threat. And so signing the pact we all know he's a part of, he was granted the strength to cut down a version of Tiamat that was equivalent to what we see of Myrkul during Phase 2 of Kethric's boss fight. I'm not sure exactly how their strength compares, but point being that it wasn't the deity's full power. Even still though, was there any one enemy Karlach faced in the Blood War that compares to even a fraction of Tiamat? I'd say Karlach's overall capabilities are more proven than Wyll's as we recruit them in Act 1, but Wyll has Mizora in his back pocket. He may not like being a part of the Binding Pact, but it's undeniable that Wyll is essentially an extension of Mizora's strength, being his patron. I mean, he's mentioned being able to cast some seriously high-level spells. The ability to topple an avatar of Tiamat was likely the most potent instance of her bestowing power onto Wyll, but who's to say she wants her sweet little pup to die now? If we were to let the encounter by the river go on without her intervention, I'm fairly confident in saying that Wyll would be able to take her, only due to whatever boons Mizora may bestow in order to ensure that her request was seen through. It would be a bit silly of me to deny the sheer amount of battle experience Karlach accumulated over the course of the Blood War, and I'm certainly not saying this would be an easy fight for Wyll. I just have a hard time believing that Mizora wouldn't find a way to intervene in a similar but far less dramatic manner than she did when her pup was against Tiamat, enough to slightly tip the scales towards the Blade of Frontiers in my eyes. I don't think either of them can compete with the rest of the list though, as it's comprised of some characters with seriously really impressive track records, and until maybe the number 1 spot, it's going to be splitting hairs. The first of these remaining companions we'll be talking about is Minsc, and no, Boo isn't incorporated into this ranking, or else he'd be a clear number 1. He honestly still might have been able to put up a fight for first place on his own if it wasn't for the waning of his powers through his time as the Stone Lord, only to subsequently lose his memories and be afflicted with an illithid tadpole. Minsc has gone on many grand adventures and toppled some of the mightiest foes you could think of. He was such a profound adventurer that in the year 1409 there was a statue constructed in the honor of his legacy. But what the Baldurians weren't aware of was the fact that the statue was actually Minsc and Boo themselves, petrified and put on display for everyone to admire but not know the true nature of. This wasn't the end of his story though, as in the mid-1480s, about 10 or so years before Baldur's Gate 3 takes place, a sorceress Delina had accidentally struck the statue while a spell being cast at a gargoyle went awry. This wild magic dispelled the petrification locking Minsc and Boo in place, and they would go on to join Delina and other ambitious adventurers in order to continue his lust for a good thrill and the vanquishing of evil. And so Minsc would undertake even more dangerous quests, some taking them to places like the Demiplane of Dread and others the fucking spine of the world. Okay, so far it seems like Minsc has some qualifying traits that should easily put him a couple spots higher compared to what's ahead. He had taken down foes like Deniak, Delina's brother who had transformed into a mighty red dragon, and even stood toe-to-toe with Strahd von Zarevich, a Dark Lord overseeing one of the domains of Dread in the Shadowfell. This is all just within the past decade as well, so it's not that far off from when we would really start paying attention to what their strength looks like once the year hits 1492 and the Absolute really begins to start coming into play. But that's also part of the issue. Jaheira and Minsc had reunited in Baldur's Gate as a result of rumblings of the Absolute's rise to power in the city. But not long before, Minsc had been submerged in the River Styx while on an adventure in Avernus with the group just mentioned, wiping away his memories and seemingly all of his already limited wits, leading Minsc to hard-headedly charge straight into the first combat opportunity they encountered, forcing Jaheira to leave him behind as he didn't quite allow them to properly gather allies and even a plan for that matter. And so Minsc's inability to hold himself back landed him straight into the clutches of the Absolute, where similar to Minthara means he's going to be judged from his capabilities as of the events of the game before we even see the first cutscene with the Nautiloid. By this point in the story, he's following an imposter Jaheira, and is most defined by his role played in the beef between the guild and his own faction. Though while he has many inhibitors placed on him by this point, I have a hard time believing that he'd be trounced by any of those who came before him on the list. But he doesn't quite stand up to his old friend Jaheira, who has been unaffected by any memory loss or the more impactful infection of an illithid tadpole. She's only had her powers wane over time due to age, and even an older Jaheira is a potent threat. While Minsc had his life preserved by a long period of petrification, now that he's back to normal, he still needs to compete with a traditional human lifespan. Though while Jaheira might have a longer lifespan, ranging around 180 years or so due to her nature as a half-elf, she's been alive at this point for 145 years, and is certainly approaching the end stages of life herself. Though all the years that Minsc had spent frozen in time, Jaheira spent gaining more experience and wisdom. I said Minsc's power had likely regressed a bit, having endured the equivalent of being frozen in carbonite, but his adventures alongside Delina and the rest of that party show that he's still, as of recently, extremely capable of felling colossal foes. But it's just tough to apply his potential with full recollection of his memory and wits when he's in the state spoken of prior to our experience in the game. And let's not slight Jaheira by making it sound like she needed Minsc to be nerfed in order to hop above him in the list. She was in the same party he was during the events of Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, where they expelled the evil of Baal's devious cult on numerous occasions. Not only this, but she was able to lead forces to victory over Ketheric Thorm's initial pursuit of power as a Dark Justiciar. And it took Myrkul's intervention to prevent Jaheira from having firmly proven herself outside of working alongside Minsc. I'm rather confident that she would have been capable of joining Minsc on his second set of adventures and would have performed quite well. Delina and the rest of them might be overall stronger than Jaheira when she was their age, but don't doubt a seasoned veteran. And again, the most convincing part of this argument is that Minsc is simply not himself in the same period of time that we're comparing these characters. Though if you believe the legendary adventurers are in the wrong spots, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. But a character who I think shoots out in front of both of them is Halsin, Archdruid of the Emerald Grove and 350-year-old hunk of naturistic passion. I don't think people give Halsin the credit he deserves. He's mostly a passive companion outside of Act 1, where the goblin conflict makes his anger flare up a bit, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't show that he's capable of far more than simply shapeshifting. He might not have as many feats of combat throughout his history, but one of them is the same encounter Jaheira was a part of when the Harpers faced off against Ketheric Thorm. She recognized recognized that her forces likely couldn't take down the Sharran threat on their own, so they employed the help of Halsin and the Grove, where they were together led by Kelvin Arunson of Waterdeep to conquer the encounter. So any credit that Jaheira gets for emerging victorious should go to Halsin as well. And we honestly don't even need to point to many of his feats of strength at all in order to determine his true capabilities. His action of creating a portal to the Shadowfell is evidence of him being able to quite casually cast 7th level spells. Halsin may need us to protect it during the moment by the Last Light Beach that everybody hates, but that's because he also needed to traverse the Shadowfell and recover Thaniel once inside. He was given an idea of where he should be looking, but at the end of the day, even he reiterates to us just how dangerous of a task this would be for anybody even just a bit less powerful as he. And for him to insist on going at it alone gives us the impression that he's rather confident in his own abilities to come back unscathed in a plane of existence that would consume some of the strongest adventurers if they weren't careful. Now, we ourselves go into the Shrouded Plane, and even Minsc, who's a couple entries back, had done it too when he was thrust into the Domain of Dread, which it itself is its own corner of the Shadowfell. But, and I could be wrong, Halsin opening up a random portal into the Shadowfell seems like things could go wrong a lot easier, compared to running across areas with established structures and even just traversable land in general like we might have when we approach Dame Aelin. And it's worth noting that Halsin has barely cracked the surface when it comes to his potential to grow into a character that could even take first place on this list. Being an Archdruid is no joke. That shapeshifting Jaheira can do? Yeah, Halsin can do it as many times a day as he realistically wants, being capable of turning into an even wider assortment of ferocious beasts and elementals than we can imagine she would be able to. I think the biggest issue though is that we really don't get to see Halsin show off even a fraction of his power while we travel alongside him in the game. Other than the portal to the Shadowfell he makes, we know him as the peaceful defender of the Emerald Grove, only really stepping up to fight when his domain is under threat. But this is typically the way that Archdruids operate. They aren't usually adventurers who prove themselves through feats of strength. Their powers are, hopefully, never needed. But I'm sure in the 400 or so years that Halsin has left to live, if you were to test him, you might make out worse than if you challenged an old Jaheira or a tadpoled and memory-stripped Minsc. Now, with the process of elimination, you've most certainly narrowed down the final spot, right? I mean, to be honest, it would be hard to say that most of you didn't see this one coming when you clicked on the video, but there was just a bit of hesitation to put our favorite wizard from Waterdeep at number 1 before he eventually earned the title. And I'll tell you why. Gale, having been Mystra's very chosen as a result of his skills as a prodigal wizard, would put him so far above every other character on this list that there wouldn't really be a point to discuss it. No mere mortal could garner the attention of Mystra to the point of sharing a bed with her, but Gale did. He speaks of, even from a young age, not only being able to manipulate the weave, but compose it as well. And while we have some magic users amongst our party, Mystra wouldn't have given them a glance even a fraction of a percent like how she did for Gale. So what's the holdup? Sounds like the discussion should just end here. For the most part, we aren't taking the tadpole into account unless it occurred prior to the start of the game. So what would bring him down to contention with an Archdruid like Halsin? Well, here's where the Karsite Orb comes in. This hungry orb of Netherese magic was thrust into Gale as a result of him attempting to gather the lost piece of Mystra's essence that she lost during Karsus's folly. What he collected turned out to be the orb we now know to afflict him, and it's been feeding on his magical abilities ever since. A condition that sounds like it should be knocking him down a few pegs, especially considering how Mystra says how Gale is lucky that the orb only took his magic and not his life. But I need you to understand just how strong Gale was before the orb. It was not a miracle that Gale wasn't killed. He's a mortal who was on a level similar to that of Mystra prior to becoming a goddess. He was destined for so much more than the state that the orb has put him in, the chosen of the Mother of Magic, and if he just kept his ambition in check, one who would have likely followed in similar footsteps as her. Here's the thing though, we can acknowledge that Gale has had a significant amount of his power siphoned by the orb. But once given the mission to explode himself and destroy the crown along with the brain, Mystra alleviates the hunger of his orb by letting it feed on the true weave until the Absolute is defeated. And even though this is the case, we can assume that the orb being a plague on him for as long as it had been, left him as just a fraction of what he was. Though he was still able to, with the proper knowledge that is, utilize the crown, the orb, and his own powers to ascend into the God of Ambition. And I know we're not talking about how these characters end up by the end of the game, but he's arguably weaker as the game goes on. If Gale had the knowledge and came across the crown earlier on in his adventure, when he was just a bit more fresh with his affliction with the orb, it would have been no question that he could have ascended. Even a fraction of the chosen of Mystra is capable of some incredible things. And I don't think any of the other 9 companions we recruit have the potential to become a god if they were given the chance. Maybe Boo. We must keep eye on him. Thanks for watching. Did you agree with my list? Who am I kidding? Surely you didn't. Well, let me know what you might have disagreed with in the comments below. I'm sure there are a few things I misjudged. Be sure to subscribe for more if you enjoyed, and don't forget to give the video a like and even share it with a friend to see what they think of the list. And thank you so much again to War Thunder for sponsoring today's video. Make sure to play it for free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, or mobile now by using the links in my pinned comment or video description. And if you're new or returning and haven't played in a while on PC or console, you definitely don't want to miss out on the massive bonus pack they're offering. Thanks again for watching, and don't forget to keep figuring out fantasy.